Have you ever witnessed a moment so flawless it felt like a scene from a movie? A beautiful pregnant wife, a millionaire husband showering her with affection in the city's most exclusive restaurant. What if in the blink of an eye that perfect picture shattered? This isn't a story about a simple argument. It's about a public betrayal so audacious it left an entire room breathless. It's about a husband who toasted his mistress in front of his wife, and a wife who, instead of crying, chose to dismantle his entire world before the sun came up. Prepare yourself, because this is the story of how a single devastating toast led to the most calculated act of revenge imaginable. The light at Aurelia was designed to make everyone look like a secret billionaire. It dripped from crystal chandeliers pooled on the dark mahogany tables and cast a forgiving golden glow on the city's elite. Tonight, its forgiving light was focused on Marcus and Vivian Thorne. To anyone watching, they were the restaurant's centerpiece. Marcus Thorne was a man forged in the crucible of real estate and aggressive acquisitions. He wasn't old money. He was a force of nature who had bent the New York skyline to his will. He had the sharp jawline, the custom-tailored suit, and the Patek Philippe watch that didn't just tell time, but announced his arrival. His fortune was loud, and he liked it that way. Across from him, Vivian was the portrait of serene elegance. Her beauty was of a quieter, more profound sort. Her family, the De la Cruz dynasty, had a lineage that whispered of old-world grace rather than shouted about stock prices. She was 7 months pregnant, the gentle curve of her belly a testament to the future of the Thorne Empire. Her dark hair was swept back, revealing a collar of diamonds that Marcus had gifted her that afternoon, a just-because present that was anything but. She smiled, a soft, practiced expression she had perfected over 5 years of marriage. It was the smile of a woman who understood her role to be the beautiful, stable anchor for a man in perpetual, brilliant motion. "To us, my love," Marcus said, raising his glass of champagne. Vivian lifted her glass of sparkling water, the crystal clinking softly against his. "And to the next chapter, the Thorne heir." He beamed a wide, predatory smile that had charmed investors and crushed competitors. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. His touch was proprietary, as if she were another one of his prized possessions. "You're glowing, Izzy," he murmured, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "Motherhood suits you." Vivian felt the familiar tightening in her chest. He never asked how she felt. He only commented on how she looked. For months, this had been their dynamic. Her pregnancy wasn't a shared journey. It was his latest and greatest project. He had orchestrated the nursery with the same ruthless efficiency he used to acquire a new skyscraper, hiring the best designers and flying in furniture from Italy, all without once asking her what she wanted. Her body was merely the vessel for his legacy. The dinner progressed in a familiar rhythm. Marcus held court, recounting a recent victory over a rival developer, his voice booming with self-congratulation. The people at the neighboring tables, a mix of finance moguls and socialites, would occasionally glance over their faces, a mixture of envy and admiration. Vivian nodded and smiled, the perfect supportive wife. She had learned long ago that Marcus didn't want a partner in conversation. He wanted an audience. But tonight, something was different. A nervous energy radiated from him, a jittery excitement that went beyond his usual bravado. His eyes kept darting towards the entrance of the restaurant. "Expecting someone?" Vivian asked, her voice light, betraying none of the cold dread coiling in her stomach. "Always networking, my love. The wheels never stop turning," he said, patting her hand dismissively. Then she saw it. A woman had entered the restaurant. She was tall, impossibly thin, with a cascade of blonde hair that seemed to catch every shard of light. She wore a red dress that was less a piece of clothing and more a statement of intent. It clung to her body like a second skin, a stark, fiery contrast to Vivian's elegant navy blue maternity gown. The woman made no move towards a table. Instead, her eyes locked onto Marcus, and a slow, knowing smile spread across her face. Chloe Sterling, a junior analyst at a rival firm. Vivian had seen her at a few charity galas, a beautiful shark circling in the periphery. She had never given her a second thought. Until now. The air between Marcus and Chloe crackled with a silent charged energy that was as palpable as a physical touch. The world seemed to slow down. Vivian saw it all, the slight, almost imperceptible nod from Marcus, the way Chloe's smile widened, the triumphant glint in her eyes. It was a confirmation of 1,000 tiny suspicions Vivian had been ruthlessly suppressing for the better part of a year. The late-night calls Marcus claimed were international business. The faint, unfamiliar scent of perfume on his suits. The sudden, inexplicable cruelty that would surface in his tone, followed by lavish gifts meant to paper over the cracks. She had told herself she was being paranoid, that the hormones of pregnancy were making her insecure. But seeing them in the same room connected by that invisible thread of illicit intimacy, Vivian knew. The foundation of her life, the gilded cage she had called home, had just crumbled into dust. Her heart didn't break. It turned to ice. The nausea that rose in her throat wasn't morning sickness, it was pure, unadulterated rage. But her face remained a mask of placid grace. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her water, her eyes never leaving her husband's. Marcus, oblivious to the storm gathering behind her calm facade, was now riding a wave of reckless euphoria. He had his stunning pregnant wife on his arm, a symbol of his domestic success, and now his conquest had arrived, a testament to his continued virility. In his mind, he was the king of the world, a man who could have it all. He pushed his chair back slightly and tapped his glass with a fork. The gentle chime silenced the immediate tables around them. A few more heads turned. "Excuse me, everyone," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "If I could have your attention for just a moment." Vivian froze. What is he doing? She thought, a genuine panic finally piercing through her icy composure. This was beyond reckless. This was insane. "Tonight is a special night," Marcus continued, his eyes sweeping the room before landing with deliberate weight on Chloe Sterling, who was now leaning against the bar watching the scene unfold with a look of smug satisfaction. He raised his glass high. The diamonds on his watch glittered like chips of ice. "Most of you know my wonderful wife Vivian," he said, gesturing vaguely in her direction without looking at her. "The mother of my future son." A polite, scattered applause followed. Vivian felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, a wave of pity and morbid curiosity. She wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the plush velvet of the booth. "But tonight," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, intimate tone, "I want to make a different kind of toast." He turned his body fully towards the bar, his back now angled towards his wife. He locked eyes with Chloe. "To the woman who has shown me what passion and fire truly are. To the one who makes a man feel alive." His voice was thick with emotion, a theatrical performance for an audience of two, his mistress and his wife. "To Chloe, for everything you are and for everything we will be." A collective horrified gasp sucked the air out of the room. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, and suffocating. It was a silence so complete that Vivian could hear the frantic, panicked thumping of her own heart. In that moment she was no longer Vivian Thorne, the elegant wife of a millionaire. She was a spectacle, a public humiliation, the punchline to a cruel, arrogant joke. She looked at Marcus, at the triumphant, foolish grin on his face. She looked at Chloe, who was basking in her victory, her red dress like a splash of blood against the restaurant's opulent decor. And then Vivian did something no one expected. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't throw her glass of water in his face. She smiled. It was not the soft, practiced smile from earlier. This was a new smile, a chilling, razor-sharp expression that did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were chips of obsidian, cold and hard, and full of a terrifying clarity. She slowly, deliberately placed her napkin on the table. She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping softly against the polished floor, a sound that seemed to echo in the cavernous silence. She stood up, her pregnant belly a proud, defiant shield. She looked directly at Marcus, her gaze unwavering. "Thank you, darling," she said, her voice impossibly calm yet carrying to every corner of the now silent room. "You've just made things so much clearer." Without another word, she turned and walked away. Her steps were not rushed. They were measured, graceful, and filled with a purpose that sent a shiver down Marcus's spine, finally cutting through his arrogant haze. He watched her go, the smile on his face faltering as he realized far too late that he had not just made a toast. He had lit the fuse on a bomb, and Vivian Thorne was holding the detonator. The walk out of Aurelia was the longest of Vivian's life. She felt the weight of every stare, the heat of 100 whispers on her back. The doorman, a kind man named George who always complimented her, rushed to open the door, his face a mask of sympathy. He avoided her eyes as he murmured, "Good night, Mrs. Thorne." Even the name felt like a costume she was desperate to shed. She didn't wait for the valet to bring the Mercedes Marcus was so proud of. She walked past the line of luxury cars and out onto the cool, bustling street, hailing the first yellow cab she saw. As she sank into the worn vinyl seat, the city lights blurring past the window, the icy calm that had encased her in the restaurant finally began to crack. A single hot tear traced a path down her cheek. She wiped it away with a furious, trembling hand. This was not the time for tears. Tears were a luxury she could not afford. The man she had married, the man whose child she was carrying, had just detonated their life for the entire world to see. He had reduced her to a footnote in a toast to his mistress. He thought she would crumble. He expected hysterics, pleading a dramatic scene that would feed his ego and ultimately end with him forgiving her for her outburst. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The De La Cruz family, while not as ostentatiously wealthy as Marcus, had a different kind of power. It was a power built on intellect, strategy, and an unshakable code of honor. Her father was a diplomat who could dismantle an opponent with a quiet phrase. Her mother ran 3 international charities with the precision of a military general, and her older sister Penelope was one of the most feared corporate litigators in the city. Vivian hadn't inherited their public-facing ambition, but she had inherited their mind. For 5 years, she had willingly submerged her own formidable intellect to play the role of the perfect wife. That role was now canceled. She didn't direct the cab to the palatial penthouse she shared with Marcus. That was his territory, a monument to his ego. Instead, she gave the driver an address in a quieter, more discreet part of the city. The office of De La Cruz and Associates. She used her key to enter the silent, darkened law firm. The air smelled of old books, expensive leather, and the faint, lingering scent of her sister's strong coffee. She walked straight to Penelope's office, the war room, as they had jokingly called it since they were children. She didn't turn on the main lights, just a small desk lamp that cast long, dramatic shadows across the room. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady now. The tremor was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had one contact on speed dial, a person she hadn't spoken to in 6 months but who had been waiting for this exact moment. "It's done," Vivian said, her voice low and devoid of emotion. "He did it. Publicly." The voice on the other end was grim, professional. "I have the file ready. All surveillance logs, financial traces, and sworn affidavits are compiled." "Where do you want it sent, Mrs. Thorne?" "Not to me," Vivian corrected him. "To my sister, Penelope de la Cruz. It needs to be on her encrypted server within the hour." This was not a new plan. It was a contingency plan. A break glass in case of Armageddon protocol she had quietly put into place 8 months ago. The first time she had found a hotel receipt in his briefcase for a room she had never been to. The first time he had sneered at her opinion on a political matter, telling her to stick to picking out flowers. She had hired a private investigator, not a grubby paparazzi type, but a discreet firm run by ex-MI6 agents that specialized in corporate and marital espionage. They were expensive, precise, and utterly invisible. While Marcus was busy building his empire and chasing his sordid thrills, Vivian had been commissioning an architect's blueprint of his ruin. She knew about Chloe. She knew about 2 others before her. She knew about the secret bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. She knew about the consulting fees paid to shell corporations that were nothing more than laundromats for kickbacks. But the real leverage, the piece she had been saving, was something far more damaging. It was the key that would unlock not just her freedom, but his cage. Her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. A string of texts followed. "Izzy, where are you?" What the hell was that? Leaving like that? You created a scene. It was a stupid joke. A toast. You're overreacting. It's the hormones. Come home. We need to talk about this. Vivian, I'm not playing games. Get home. Now. The gaslighting, the threats. It was so predictable. She screenshotted every message and forwarded them to Penelope with a single word, Exhibit A. A moment later, the door to the office opened. It was Penelope, dressed not in a power suit, but in silk pajamas, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She held 2 mugs of tea in her hands. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't say, "Are you okay?" She simply handed a mug to Vivian, sat down in her large leather chair, and said, "All right, let's get to work. What's the target?" Vivian took a sip of the chamomile tea. It was warm, calming. "Not the penthouse. It's in both our names. It's a legal nightmare. Not the money in the known accounts. He can hide that in 1,000 ways. I want something that's his and his alone. Something that will hurt." She paused, picturing his portfolio of properties. And then it came to her. His sanctuary. His escape. "The condo," she said, her voice hard. "The one at 15 Central Park West." Penelope raised an eyebrow. "The bachelor pad. The one he bought before we negotiated the prenup." "The very same," Vivian confirmed. It was his pride and joy, a sleek, modern masterpiece of glass and steel that he had kept in his own name. He called it his city office, his think tank, but she knew what it was. It was his bolt hole. It was where he took women like Chloe. It was the one part of his life that was completely, utterly his. Taking it wouldn't just be taking an asset. It would be an invasion, a violation of his sacred ground. "That's his fortress, Izzy. He'll never let it go," Penelope said, her legal mind already identifying the obstacles. "He won't have a choice," Vivian replied. She leaned forward, the lamp illuminating the fierce determination in her eyes. "Because we're not going to attack his assets. We're going to attack his masterpiece, the Phoenix Tower." The Phoenix Tower was Marcus's magnum opus, a glistening 90-story skyscraper set to redefine the downtown skyline. It was his legacy, his claim to immortality. It was also, as Vivian's investigators had discovered, a house of cards built on a foundation of fraud. The investigator found it all, Penny, Vivian explained, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The steel supplier. He swapped the specified grade for a cheaper, inferior product from a non-certified manufacturer. He got a massive kickback paid into one of the shell corps. The lead inspector on the project, a man named Henderson, signed off on it. Henderson's daughter just so happens to have had her entire Harvard tuition paid for by an anonymous scholarship fund that traces back to another of Marcus's LLCs." Penelope's eyes widened. This was no longer a messy divorce. This was corporate fraud, bribery, racketeering. This was a story that would lead the Wall Street Journal. This was jail time. "If that gets out," Penelope breathed, "he's not just ruined. He's finished. The tower will be tied up in litigation for a decade. Every investor will sue him into oblivion." "Exactly," Vivian said. "He thinks his biggest problem right now is a humiliated wife. He has no idea what's about to hit him." For the next 4 hours, the two sisters worked with a terrifying efficiency. Penelope drafted the documents, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She wasn't just drafting a property transfer agreement. She was constructing a legal cage. The document was an intricate web of non-disclosure clauses and waivers, all predicated on one simple brutal exchange. Vivian, meanwhile, was on her own laptop preparing her side. She compiled the most damning evidence from the investigator's file into a single password-protected folder. A summary of the Steele fraud report, a copy of the wire transfer to the inspector's scholarship fund, a photo taken by the investigator of Marcus and Henderson meeting at a discreet bar time-stamped and dated. It was a kill shot compressed into a 5-megabyte file. As the first hints of dawn began to soften the hard edges of the New York skyline, they were ready. Penelope printed the final document, the paper still warm from the printer. It was a quitclaim deed, clean and simple, transferring all rights and ownership of the property at 15 Central Park West Apartment 72B from Marcus Thorne to Vivian de la Cruz Thorne, for the sum of $1. Penelope also printed a separate, much thicker document, a post-nuptial agreement that invalidated their original prenup citing infidelity and fraud, and laid out a temporary separation with a motion for divorce to be filed. It included clauses about child support custody, and most importantly, a draconian NDA that would prevent Marcus from ever speaking publicly about Vivian or their child. "You need a notary," Penelope stated. "Already handled," Vivian said. She had made one more call an hour ago. A 24-hour mobile notary, highly recommended by her investigator for his speed and discretion, was waiting in a coffee shop a block away, ready to be summoned. Vivian finally stood up and walked to the window. The sky was now a bruised purple, the city slowly stirring to life below. She saw a lone cab pull up to the curb in front of their penthouse building miles away. Marcus, likely drunk and defeated, finally coming home to an empty apartment. She took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs. The pregnant woman who had walked out of that restaurant hours ago was gone. In her place stood a general on the verge of victory. "It's time," she said to Penelope. "Let's go and collect." The ride to the penthouse was silent. Penelope drove, her expression a mixture of fierce protectiveness and clinical focus. Vivian sat in the passenger seat, the folder containing the deed and the post-nup resting on her pregnant belly like a shield. She wasn't nervous. The time for nerves had passed. This was simply the execution of a plan. The sun was just beginning to peek over the East River, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was sunrise. The deadline. The doorman at their building, a different one from the night shift, greeted them with a professional nod. "Good morning, Mrs. Thorne, Ms. de la Cruz." "Good morning, Robert," Vivian replied, her voice even. "Is Mr. Thorne in?" "He arrived about an hour ago, ma'am. He seemed quite upset." "I'm sure he did," Vivian said dryly. The private elevator opened directly into their penthouse foyer. The apartment was a cavern of glass and white marble filled with priceless art and minimalist furniture. It felt cold, sterile. A museum of a life rather than a home. And it was a mess. A half-empty bottle of Macallan 25 stood on the living room coffee table next to a discarded tie and an overturned glass. The faint smell of stale whiskey and desperation hung in the air. Marcus was slumped in an armchair, his back to the entrance, staring out at the panoramic view of Central Park. His custom suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled. He looked small in the vast, opulent room. He heard the soft chime of the elevator and turned his face a wreck of anger, confusion, and exhaustion. When he saw not just Vivian but Penelope in her sharp business attire, his expression hardened into a defensive scowl. "What is this?" he spat, his voice hoarse. "You bring your attack dog sister into my home." "It's my home too, Marcus, for now," Vivian said, her voice cutting through the tension. She walked calmly to the center of the room, placing the folder on the marble coffee table with a soft but definitive thud. "And Penelope is not here as my sister. She's here as my legal counsel." "Legal counsel?" Marcus scoffed, attempting to regain some of his usual bluster. He stood up, trying to use his height to intimidate them. "Are you kidding me? For what? Because I made a stupid toast? Because your feelings are hurt? You run out of a restaurant, embarrass me, and now you want to, what, sue me, read the prenup." Izzy, you get a nice little severance package. That's it. Vivian didn't flinch. I'm not interested in the prenup. The prenup is about to become irrelevant. Sit down, Marcus. It wasn't a request. It was a command delivered with such authority that he for the first time seemed truly taken aback. He hesitated, then sank back into the armchair. We're not here to talk about your mistress, Marcus. Vivian began, her tone cold and businesslike. Frankly, she's the least of your problems. We're here to talk about the Phoenix Tower. The name hung in the air. The color drained from Marcus's face. The bravado vanished, replaced by a flicker of pure animal fear. I don't know what you're talking about, he mumbled, but his eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape route. Oh, I think you do, Vivian continued. Let's talk about grade A structural steel versus the cheap composite you sourced from that uncertified plant in Guangzhou. Let's talk about the nearly $4 million in kickbacks you funneled through a shell corporation called Apex Global Ventures. Penelope stepped forward slightly. A shell corporation, I might add, that is registered in your name alone with no links to Thorn Industries. Sloppy Marcus. Very sloppy. Marcus's jaw went slack. He looked from Vivian to Penelope, his mind clearly racing, trying to understand how they could possibly know this. And let's talk about Inspector Henderson, Vivian said, delivering the killing blow. A good man, a family man, a man whose daughter just received a full scholarship to Harvard from the Metropolitan Bright Future Foundation. She let the name hang in the air. Another one of your pet projects, isn't it? An LLC funded directly by you. Marcus was silent. The silence was his confession. He was trapped. He looked at Vivian as if seeing her for the first time. The beautiful, docile wife was gone. In her place was a stranger, a cold-blooded strategist who had him cornered. What? What do you want? He finally whispered, his voice cracking. The master of the universe had been reduced to this. Vivian opened the folder on the table. She slid the first document across the polished marble towards him. It was the quitclaim deed. I want the condo, she said simply. 15 Central Park West. You're going to sign it over to me, free and clear, right now. He stared at the paper as if it were a snake. The condo? You want my... No, absolutely not. That's off the table. Is it? Vivian countered, her voice dangerously soft. She tapped a key on her phone and an email was sent. A second later, a notification pinged on Marcus's phone. Check your email, Marcus. With a trembling hand, he picked up his phone. He opened the email from an anonymous address. It contained a single password-protected zip file. The password, Vivian said, is your mistress's name, Chloe, all lowercase. The humiliation of it was a physical blow. He flinched. He slowly typed in the name. The file opened, revealing the summary of the fraud report, the wire transfer records, the surveillance photo of him with Henderson. It was a complete, professionally assembled package of his own damnation. That file, Penelope stated calmly, is currently sitting on a dead man's switch on an encrypted server. If we do not disable it within the next 30 minutes, it will be automatically sent to the district attorney's office, the SEC, the lead investigative reporter at the Wall Street Journal, and the board of directors of every single one of your investment partners. This is blackmail, he hissed, his face pale with sweat. No, Vivian corrected him. Blackmail is what you do for money. I don't want your money. This is a choice. Your choice. You can have your condo and with it a federal indictment, dozens of civil lawsuits that will strip you of every penny and the complete and utter collapse of your company. Or you can sign that piece of paper. You sign over the condo as a safe, untainted home for your child, a place that cannot be touched by the lawsuits when the rest of your world burns down around you. You're not giving it to me, you're giving it to your son. It's the one decent thing you have left to do. Her framing of it was a work of genius. It gave his shattered ego a tiny ledge to cling to. He could see this not as a surrender to his wife, but as a noble act for his unborn child. He stared at the deed, then back at the evidence on his phone. He was a gambler who had just been shown an unbeatable hand. He could fold or he could lose everything. The veins in his neck pulsed. For a long, tense minute, the only sound in the room was the ticking of a ridiculously expensive clock on the mantelpiece. "Get the notary," he said, his voice a dead hollow thing. Penelope made the call. 5 minutes later, the doorman announced the arrival of Mr. Peters, the mobile notary. He was a small, quiet man who entered, did his job with professional detachment, and acted as if he were merely notarizing a standard mortgage document, not witnessing the implosion of a tycoon's life. Marcus took the pen. His hand shook so badly he could barely sign his name. He pressed down hard, the ink bleeding slightly on the page. He signed the deed. Then he signed the post-nuptial agreement, his signature a frantic, angry scrawl. The notary affixed his seal, stamped the documents, and made his entries. He packed his bag, accepted the cash fee Penelope handed him, and left as quietly as he had arrived. It was done. Vivian took the papers. She stood up, her face unreadable. She walked towards the elevator, Penelope following behind her. She paused at the entrance and looked back at the broken man standing in the middle of his glass palace. The sun was now fully up, streaming through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "The locks on the condo will be changed by noon," she said. "My things will be moved out of here by the end of the day. Don't contact me directly again. All communication will go through my lawyer." She stepped into the elevator. Just before the doors slid shut, she looked him in the eye one last time. "By the way, Marcus," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "it's a girl." The doors closed, leaving him alone in the wreckage of his life, the morning sun shining brightly on his ruin. The elevator's descent was a journey through a void, a silent 90-floor drop from a life that had just been surgically excised. As it slid down the core of the building, Vivian felt the immense pressure of the penthouse, of Marcus's suffocating presence, and of the last 5 years of her life begin to recede, like the tide pulling away from the shore. She leaned her head back against the cool, brushed steel wall, the polished surface a stark contrast to the turbulent heat that had been churning inside her. She closed her eyes, one hand resting protectively on the stiff manila folder that held her liberty, the other splayed across the gentle, firm swell of her belly. The adrenaline that had sharpened her senses and hardened her voice was beginning to ebb, leaving in its wake a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. She had done it. Penelope watched her younger sister, her usually severe expression softened by a wave of immense pride and relief. She saw the subtle trembling in Vivian's hands now that the performance was over, and the faint bluish tinge of fatigue under her eyes. "It's a girl, huh?" Penelope said, her voice low and intimate in the confined space. "You've been holding on to that little gem for a while. I thought you were going to burst when my assistant sent over the gender confirmation results last week." A genuine smile, the first one that felt truly her own in what felt like an eternity, finally bloomed on Vivian's tired face. It was a slow, radiant dawn of a smile. "I was saving it," she admitted, her voice raspy with spent emotion. "It was my last card to play. I wanted the very last thing he ever learned about our child to be something he couldn't control, couldn't put his name on, couldn't claim as his own grand design. I wanted him to know from the very beginning that she belongs to me." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime into the cavernous, art-filled lobby. The morning was in full, glorious swing. Sunlight streamed through the towering glass panes, glinting off the polished marble floors. The city was a symphony of motion and purpose, utterly indifferent to the personal apocalypses and quiet coronations unfolding within its glass and steel canyons. For Vivian, it felt like breathing for the first time. It was the first day of a new world. Their first stop was not the newly acquired condo, but a branch of a staid, old-money bank where the De La Cruz family had maintained accounts for 3 generations. The atmosphere inside was hushed, almost reverent. It smelled of old paper and quiet power. Here, they didn't just deposit the original notarized quitclaim deed and the signed post-nuptial agreement into a safe deposit box. They performed a ritual. Penelope, ever the lawyer, first had a bank officer make multiple notarized, certified copies. "Rule number 1 of litigation, Izzy," she murmured as she inspected each copy. "Never ever possess only one copy of your freedom. We store the original here in neutral territory. We keep certified copies with me with you, and one in a third location." He could never guess. We build a web of redundancy so complete that the original document almost ceases to matter. The fact of it becomes undeniable. As the heavy steel door of the safe deposit box clicked shut, Vivian felt a palpable sense of finality. It was like closing a tomb on her old life, entombing the weapons she had used to win her war. Their second stop was 15 Central Park West. The building itself was a statement of contrast to Marcus's aesthetic. Where his penthouse was a monument to modern aggressive ambition, this building was limestone and grace with an air of quiet, inherited wealth. It was the kind of place whose residents didn't need to announce their importance. As Vivian stood in the opulent but understated lobby, she understood its appeal to him. It represented a class and stability he coveted but could never truly embody. He could only purchase a piece of it. A locksmith, a discreet professional Penelope had sourced, was already waiting. "Mrs. Thorne?" he asked quietly. She nodded, the name feeling strange on her tongue now, like a borrowed coat. The ascent to apartment 72B was different. The elevator was paneled in rich, dark wood, the light soft and forgiving. When the locksmith opened the door, Vivian stepped across the threshold into the life Marcus had hidden from her. The air was the first thing that hit her, a stale mix of expensive cologne, leftover takeout, and the lingering, cloyingly sweet scent of Chloe Sterling's perfume. It was the smell of deceit. The decor was a fortress of solitude, aggressively masculine and impersonal. In the living room, 2 massive dark leather sofas faced each other over a chrome and glass table. On the wall hung a huge, chaotic abstract painting that screamed of its price tag. The kitchen was a sleek, untouched expanse of stainless steel, clearly used for little more than chilling champagne. She walked slowly, her footsteps echoing slightly in the stillness. Penelope followed at a distance, giving her space. This was a necessary violation, a reclamation. In the bedroom, the source of the perfume was strongest. It was dominated by a massive king-size bed with a severe gray silk headboard. And on the nightstand, where a photo of his wife should have been, sat a large frame picture of Marcus beaming, shaking hands with the mayor at a political fundraiser. It was a shrine to himself. Vivian felt a cold, hard anger, but it was distant now, like an echo. This place wasn't a home. It was a stage set for his ego. It was pathetic. She walked to the vast floor-to-ceiling windows that formed the apartment's entire western wall. They overlooked the park, a stunning, breathtaking vista of green treetops, winding paths, and the sparkling reservoir. She slid one of the heavy glass doors open. A rush of fresh, cool morning air flooded the apartment, and she took a deep, cleansing breath, as if chasing out the ghosts of Marcus's sordid life. "First thing," she said, turning to Penelope, her voice clear and strong, "is an industrial cleaning service, a deep clean, an exorcism. Then we call decorators, and a demolition crew for that atrocious bathroom." "Already have a list for all 3. Penelope replied, her phone already in her hand. "And I've taken the liberty of contacting a moving company. The best. They specialize in sensitive corporate and domestic relocations. They'll be at the penthouse this afternoon to pack and move your belongings. Discreetly. You won't even have to set foot in there again." Vivian's throat tightened with gratitude. "Penny, I couldn't have—" "Don't thank me," her sister cut her off gently but firmly. "This was all you, Izzy. You built the strategy. You played the long game. You gathered the intel. You won the war. I just notarized the surrender." So, across town in his glass palace, 90 floors in the sky, Marcus Thorne's world was fracturing. After Vivian and Penelope left, he stood motionless for what felt like an hour, the signed documents seared into his memory. The quiet efficiency of his defeat was the most insulting part. There had been no screaming, no tears, just a cold, clinical dismantling. Then the shock gave way to a primal rage. With a guttural roar of frustration, he swept the contents of the marble coffee table onto the floor. The heavy crystal decanter of Macallan 25, a gift from a sheik, shattered against the floor, its precious aged liquid pooling like whiskey-scented blood. His fingers, shaking with fury, fumbled with his phone. He dialed his lawyer, the legal pit bull, Rick Stanton. "She took the condo! She took the goddamn condo!" Marcus yelled into the phone, his voice a raw, ragged thing. He paced the length of the living room, a caged tiger in a bespoke suit. "She blackmailed me, Rick. She cooked up some insane file, some absolute nonsense about the Phoenix Tower. We have to invalidate the signing. We'll claim coercion, duress, emotional distress." Stanton, accustomed to his client's volcanic temper, listened patiently. When Marcus finally paused to take a breath, the lawyer's voice was as grim and cold as a tombstone. "Marcus, let me be very clear. Did you see the evidence she claimed to have? It's a bluff. A fabrication. It has to be," Marcus insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Stanton pressed his tone surgical. "The allegations regarding the steel supplier for the Phoenix, the payments made to a fund connected to Inspector Henderson's family, are any of those allegations in any way baseless?" A heavy, damning silence crackled down the line. That was all the answer Stanton needed. "Marcus," the lawyer continued, his voice dropping, all aggression gone, replaced by the funereal tone of a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "You need to listen to me very carefully. This isn't a messy divorce negotiation anymore. The moment she mentioned corporate fraud and bribery, this became a criminal case with potential civil lawsuits that could bankrupt you 10 times over. You signing that deed wasn't an act of coercion. It was a crisis management decision, possibly the smartest one you've made all year. You didn't lose a $15 million condo, my friend. You might have just stayed out of federal prison." Stanton let that sink in. The woman didn't just outplay you, she checkmated you. And in doing so, she inadvertently saved your neck, whether she meant to or not. Her sister is Penelope de la Cruz. They will have a recording of the entire conversation. They will have affidavits. They will have anticipated your every move. If you try to fight this, if you poke this bear, they won't just fight back. They will release that file. And then the condo will be the least of your worries. Your assets will be frozen, and you'll be trading that suit for an orange jumpsuit. The lawyer's final piece of advice was brutal and unequivocal. Let it go. Consider the condo the cost of doing business. A severance package from a life you clearly couldn't manage. Do not contact her. Do not threaten her. Let the lawyers handle the financials of the post and up. But the property transfer is a done deal. You lost. Checkmated. The word echoed in the vast empty penthouse. He, Marcus Thorne, the master of the deal, had been beaten. By Vivian. The quiet, beautiful, docile wife he had so profoundly and catastrophically underestimated. His second call was an act of pure, spiteful housekeeping. He dialed Chloe. She answered on the second ring, her voice a purr of bubbly, triumphant expectation. "Marcus, darling, I can't believe what you did last night. It was the most wonderfully romantic thing anyone has ever done. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing. The entire city is talking. When am I going to see you? We have to celebrate." "It's over," he said, his voice dead and hollow. The line went silent for a beat. "What's over? Our celebration? What are you talking about?" "Us," he clarified, biting off the word. "The entire thing. It's done. Don't call me again." He hung up the phone, severing the connection before her confused protests could even begin. It wasn't about principle. It was a pragmatic amputation. Chloe was the fuse. His grand romantic toast hadn't been a declaration of love. It had been the single most expensive sentence ever uttered, costing him his fortress, his power, and his own illusion of invincibility. The fallout was immediate. The story from Aurelia had ricocheted through the city's elite circles with the speed of a stock market crash. By lunchtime, gossip columns hinted at a real estate titan's public implosion. His phone, which usually pulsed with a constant stream of calls, fell silent. He was suddenly radioactive. The call from his board of directors came at 3 o'clock. They requested an informal update meeting for the following morning. No one mentioned the toast or his wife, but the subtext was a screaming siren. Their questions about the Phoenix Tower timeline, usually perfunctory, would now be forensic. The king was wounded and the wolves were gathering. That evening, as Vivian sat on a packing box in the middle of her new living room eating takeout salad with Penelope, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but some instinct made her answer. "Hello, Mrs. Thorne, Vivian Thorne." The voice was young, reedy, and trembling with a mix of anger and self-pity. "It's Chloe Sterling." Vivian felt a wave of profound weariness. "I have nothing to say to you." "Please, just wait," Chloe pleaded, her voice cracking. "He broke up with me. By text he said it was over and blamed me for everything. For your reaction. I saw on page 6 that you got the condo. I wanted to say, congratulations, you won. I hope you're happy. I hope you take him for every last cent he's worth." It was a pathetic, self-serving attempt to find an ally in her own humiliation. Chloe saw the world as a simple ledger of wins and losses of money and men. Vivian stood up and walked to the now clean windows looking out at the darkening park below. "This was never about winning, Chloe," she said, her voice devoid of heat, filled only with a final clarifying certainty. "And it was never about taking him for what he's worth. It was about securing something that is worthy. My daughter, our future, a future that you have absolutely no part in. Please don't call me again." She ended the call and blocked the number, wiping the final toxic loose end from her life. The condo was quiet around her, her boxes filled with her books. Her photos and the few personal items she truly cherished formed a small protective circle in the vast room. It wasn't a palace, but it was a sanctuary. Just then she felt it. A strong, definitive flutter from within. A kick. She gasped softly and laid both hands on her stomach. A slow, powerful smile spread across her face. It was her daughter announcing her presence, a secret no longer. It was a promise. "Just us now, little one," she whispered to the empty room, her voice full of a strength she was only just beginning to understand. "And we're going to be just fine." The cage was gone. In its place stood a fortress with a view of the entire world, and she, Vivian de la Cruz, was its queen. And so Vivian Thorne's new life began. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, determined work of rebuilding. The story of the toast at Aurelia became a legend in New York society, a cautionary tale about the perils of arrogance and underestimating the quiet strength of a woman with everything to fight for. Marcus was never charged. Vivian never released the files. The threat was enough. But his empire faltered, his reputation shattered. He was diminished, a ghost haunting the towers he had built. Vivian, on the other hand, flourished. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, naming her Olivia. She redecorated the condo not as a monument to revenge, but as a vibrant, loving home. She rediscovered herself not as Mrs. Thorne, but as Vivian de la Cruz, a formidable woman, a loving mother, and the architect of her own destiny. What did you think of Vivian's incredible story of strategy and survival? Was her revenge justified? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Millionaire takes mistress to wife's birthday party, but his pregnant wife makes a life-changing decision. A polished limousine idles outside the grand gates of the Harrington estate in Manhattan, its engine humming like an anxious heartbeat. On this crisp spring evening, a glamorous party unfolds inside, meant to celebrate the wife of multi-billionaire Alexander Harrington. Yet, as guests sip vintage champagne and gossip about the latest tabloids, a scandalous sight turns every head. The billionaire arrives not with his wife on his arm, but with a stunning young woman few recognize. Whispers ripple through the crowd, for Alexander's pregnant wife is still inside, oblivious to the social earthquake about to strike on her very own birthday. Alexander Harrington was no stranger to scandal. A charismatic entrepreneur known for his sweeping business conquests, he had always carried with him an air of insatiable ambition. The Harrington name was woven into the fabric of New York's high society. His philanthropic galas attracted major figures like Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, and even foreign dignitaries. He lived in a sprawling estate overlooking Central Park, a testament to his unimaginable wealth. For years, the public had lauded him for his confidence, generosity, and devilish smile. In private, however, there were darker rumors swirling, stories of backroom deals, hush money, and quiet heartbreaks. On the surface, Alexander's marriage to Clarissa Taylor Harrington was a picture of perfection. Clarissa, an Oxford-educated art historian, came from old money herself. Her father had bankrolled the expansions of major art museums across Europe. Photographs in the tabloids and glossy magazines featured Clarissa's radiant smile and Alexander's unwavering arm around her shoulders. They were the golden couple who seemed to have it all: the looks, the lineage, the wealth. They graced the covers of lifestyle publications, donating substantial sums to children's hospitals and educational initiatives. Clarissa often accompanied Alexander to high-stakes business meetings, proving herself as a formidable negotiator. Anyone who saw them in those early days believed they were unstoppable together. Yet success came with a cost. Before long, Alexander began to distance himself from Clarissa. He poured himself into building Harrington Global, a conglomerate that spanned tech investments, real estate, and environmental solutions. Late nights in the office, trips overseas to broker major deals, and social events that Clarissa wasn't invited to became routine. Despite her growing suspicions, Clarissa tried to remain supportive, especially when she discovered she was pregnant. She planned to surprise Alexander with the news at her upcoming birthday party, a lavish gathering where she hoped they could reconnect in front of their closest friends and family. As the big night approached, the house buzzed with preparations. Lavish flower arrangements arrived in waves, filling the mansion with the scent of white orchids and subtle honeysuckle. Crystal chandeliers were polished to a sparkling sheen. The catering team meticulously planned a 12-course meal featuring delicacies flown in from around the world. Clarissa's father, Winston Taylor, personally ensured that the guest list was curated with dignitaries, celebrities, and old family friends. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Alexander was finishing up a secret dinner at an exclusive Michelin star restaurant with a woman named Sophia de la Cruz. Sophia had entered his life barely a year ago as a marketing consultant. Young, ambitious, and undeniably captivating, she had quickly become more than just a professional acquaintance. Alexander found himself enthralled by her energy and fresh perspective. Their bond deepened behind closed doors, away from the paparazzi's watchful eyes. Like a siren's call, Sophia offered the excitement that Alexander felt he was missing. She encouraged his most extravagant desires and made him feel invincible. That night, while Clarissa went over last-minute arrangements for her birthday party, Alexander decided to invite Sophia. It was a decision born of arrogance, fueled by the high that came from believing he could control any situation. How could there be any repercussions, he reasoned. He was Alexander Harrington, after all, a man who shaped the narrative. He believed the world danced to his tune. Little did he know, the stage was set for a betrayal that would change everything. Clarissa's birthday party shimmered with the promise of a memorable evening. The estate's grand ballroom was alight with crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing across the polished marble floors. Velvet draped tables were topped with elegant centerpieces of orchids, peonies, and flickering gold candles. A string quartet performed in a corner, their music weaving seamlessly through the chatter of Manhattan's elite. Clarissa, dressed in a flowing silk gown that draped delicately over her growing bump, greeted each guest with warmth. Though her pregnancy was a secret to most, the subtle curvature of her abdomen gave hints of the new life stirring within her. She planned to share the joyful announcement. That night, her father was to toast her birthday. Then she would offer the news, hoping to see the stunned but happy expression on Alexander's face. Among the attendees were several notable figures. Her father, Winston, who stood proud in a tailored navy suit, fashion icon Isabella Quinn, who had designed Clarissa's gown, real estate mogul Kenton Cross, and even the mayor of New York City, who had come to pay tribute to the Harringtons. Conversations swirled around potential deals, philanthropic endeavors, and the latest headlines. Yet, a peculiar restlessness hung in the air. It was as if the entire estate sensed an unspoken tension. About an hour into the festivities, a hush began to spread from the entrance. People craned their necks toward the foyer where Alexander had just arrived. He stood tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke tuxedo, his hair slicked back in a manner reminiscent of old Hollywood stars. But it wasn't Alexander's arrival that captured everyone's shock. It was the presence of the woman on his arm, Sophia de la Cruz, in a figure-hugging red gown that shimmered with sequins, walked with the confidence of someone who had already conquered the room. Heads turned as she stepped forward, her lips curved in a self-assured smirk. She seemed well aware of the spotlight that fell upon her. Though many recognized her from social media posts and marketing conferences, they struggled to comprehend why she was here at Clarissa's birthday celebration, especially in such an intimate capacity. Confusion and whispers rippled among the guests. Some glanced toward Clarissa, who, from across the room, locked eyes with her husband. Her smile faltered, her breath caught in her throat. She froze momentarily, gripping the stem of her champagne flute so tightly that it nearly shattered. The unthinkable had happened. Alexander had not only chosen to bring Sophia to the party, he had done so brazenly, in full public view. Clarissa felt her cheeks flush with a blend of rage and humiliation. This was supposed to be her special night, and she had spent weeks meticulously organizing every detail. The sting was unbearable. Before she could fully process her shock, Winston hurried to her side, quietly asking what was going on. She shook her head, unable to offer an answer. Alexander attempted to mask any awkwardness with a broad, confident grin. He guided Sophia deeper into the ballroom as though nothing was amiss. Some guests, loyal to Clarissa, turned away in disgust or disapproval. Others, ever the opportunists, flocked to greet the new arrival, eager to glean inside information. Moments later, a hush once again fell over the crowd as Alexander approached Clarissa. They stood face to face. Sophia hovered just behind him like a sinister shadow. "Happy birthday, darling," Alexander said, leaning in to place a perfunctory kiss on Clarissa's cheek. His words felt as cold as the tension they generated. The air crackled. An uncertain hush befell the entire ballroom. Clarissa's emotions collided, anger, hurt, and betrayal swirling into a perfect storm. She felt tears prickle at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to allow them to fall. Not here, not surrounded by these people. Summoning the composure that had been drilled into her since birth, she merely nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her voice tight. Alexander stepped aside, and Sophia stepped forward, offering a polite, "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Clarissa. I've heard so much about you." Clarissa could barely bring herself to respond. "Likewise," she managed, a single word laced with tension. Though outwardly the exchange appeared cordial, everyone in proximity sensed the electric undertones. Clarissa's father, feeling his daughter's silent plea, quickly took the microphone to begin the evening's formal toasts. The dinner was about to begin, and beneath the veneer of elegant conversation and polished smiles, a storm of betrayal brewed. The banquet hall glowed under candlelight, each course served by a fleet of uniformed waitstaff moving with practiced precision. Crystal glasses tinkled softly as servers poured top-shelf wine. Guests engaged in polite chit-chat at the round tables, though their eyes often wandered back to the triangle forming among Clarissa, Alexander, and Sophia. Clarissa sat at the head table, flanked by Winston on one side and Alexander on the other. Sophia was positioned uncomfortably close, just a seat away from Alexander. The arrangement had been made long before the identity of Alexander's guest had been revealed. Clarissa's mother had assumed Alexander would bring a business associate or perhaps a friend, never suspecting the truth. Tension hung thick in the air. Clarissa struggled to keep her posture upright, silently pleading for the night to pass quickly. She could feel the soft flutter of her baby within her, a gentle reminder of the delicate life she was fighting to protect. She forced a smile every time a guest raised a toast to her. Inside, however, her thoughts raced. Why did Alexander do this? How could he be so cruel? Halfway through dinner, Winston rose from his seat to give a formal birthday speech for his daughter. By then, a hush fell over the chatter as everyone turned their attention to the proud father. I have watched my daughter grow from a curious, determined child into a beautiful, accomplished woman, Winston began, his voice filled with affection. She has brought light into this family with her passion for art, her compassionate heart, and her unwavering loyalty. Tonight, I want to raise a toast to Clarissa, who has never ceased to amaze me. Happy birthday, my dear. Applause reverberated around the room, but Clarissa found herself trembling. She had planned to make her big announcement during the speech's aftermath, but the presence of Sophia made her question everything. Should she still reveal her pregnancy now? Should she keep it secret a while longer? Her internal debate was cut short when Winston nodded for Clarissa to stand. Summoning her courage, she placed a hand over her tummy, the other gripping her champagne flute. A trembling breath escaped her lips. Thank you, Father, and thank you all for being here tonight. 1. I have a little surprise to share with everyone. She paused, scanning the room. Her gaze landed on Alexander, whose expression was unreadable. Sophia was watching intently, almost hungrily, like a spectator waiting for the next act of a play. Clarissa mustered her composure and announced, I'm expecting a baby. Alexander and I are going to have our first child. A collective gasp filled the air, followed by applause from well-wishers. Many guests, unaware of the undercurrents, rose to congratulate her. Winston embraced his daughter, tears glistening in his proud eyes. Alexander, for his part, feigned a smile. He leaned over to Clarissa and brushed a quick kiss on her cheek, whispering, You might have told me sooner. It was a cutting remark, delivered in the presence of dozens of curious onlookers. Clarissa's heart clenched. She had expected a look of joy, or at least a flicker of genuine excitement, but all she found was mild annoyance. Even so, she endured the subsequent flood of well-wishers, politely accepting their hugs and handshakes. Meanwhile, she caught glimpses of Sophia's face, which remained surprisingly composed. There was no overt jealousy or shock, just an eerie calm that sent chills down Clarissa's spine. When dessert was served, a decadent 3-tier chocolate confection, the festive atmosphere had dimmed. Clarissa attempted to maintain conversations with guests, but found her mind drifting. She watched Alexander and Sophia from the corner of her eye, noticing how often he leaned toward her, whispering in her ear, and how she laughed quietly in return. It felt as though Clarissa had been cast as a minor character in her own celebration. The humiliation was impossible to ignore, yet beneath her hurt lay an unexpected ripple of resolve. This is my child, and I will not let Alexander's reckless behavior overshadow that. She pressed a hand against her still-growing belly. One thing was becoming clear: her future and her babies could no longer rest solely in Alexander's hands. After dinner, guests mingled in the expansive lounge area, sipping espresso and enjoying after-dinner liqueurs. A jazz ensemble took the stage, their smooth melodies drifting through the corridors. Several high-profile attendees began to make discreet exits, though many lingered, perhaps hoping to witness whatever spectacle might unfold. Clarissa stood near the grand fireplace, its crackling flames offering fleeting warmth in a room that felt increasingly cold. She was trying to console herself with small talk alongside her longtime friend, Isabella Quinn. Isabella, a notable fashion designer, had been privy to Clarissa's suspicions for months. She knew how desperately Clarissa had clung to the hope of restoring her marriage. Now, the sight of Sophia's brazen presence threatened to shatter Clarissa's composure. "How are you holding up?" Isabella asked softly, her eyes flicking to Alexander across the room. Clarissa swallowed hard. "I'm not sure. I feel humiliated, but also strangely liberated." Isabella nodded. "He's really crossed a line. You deserve better." Before Clarissa could reply, Alexander approached them, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Darling," he said, placing a cursory hand on Clarissa's shoulder, "I'm going to step outside to talk business for a moment. Kenton Cross wants to discuss a venture." Clarissa eyed him warily. "Are you sure it's just business?" Alexander scowled. "Don't start, Clarissa. Not now." He turned on his heel, leaving Clarissa with Isabella, her question unanswered. Clarissa felt a surge of anger at his dismissiveness. In front of dozens of guests and the press, he had effectively shoved aside her feelings on her own birthday. Minutes later, Clarissa noticed Sophia slip through a side door that led toward the garden terrace. Curiosity and a growing sense of indignation fueled her to follow. She excused herself from Isabella and made her way through the throng of guests, slipping out into the cool night air. The garden was beautifully landscaped, accented by floodlights illuminating carefully trimmed hedges. Statues of Greek deities stood silent guard amidst the greenery. Clarissa found Sophia near a stone bench, scrolling through her phone with a smug grin. "So," Clarissa began, her voice barely above a whisper, "you decided to come to my birthday party on the arm of my husband. Bold choice." Sophia glanced up. Instead of surprise or guilt, she merely offered a pitying smile. "Alexander insisted I come. He said it was important for us to be seen together." Clarissa felt the urge to snap back, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Tell me, does it bother you at all that he's married and expecting a child?" Sophia tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry if this hurts you, but Alexander and I, we have something real. He made it clear your relationship was falling apart. I never thought you'd be pregnant." Clarissa's pulse pounded in her ears. She wondered how long Alexander had carried on these lies, painting her as some distant, loveless wife. Every syllable from Sophia's mouth fed Clarissa's fury. "Did he tell you that I was distant because he was never home?" Clarissa fired back, her voice shaking. "That I stopped trusting him because he kept secrets? You may think you have something real, but let me tell you, Alexander's version of truth is as malleable as clay." Sophia's expression hardened. "He's different with me. I'm not here to fight you, Clarissa. I just came because he asked me to." A sudden wave of nausea swelled within Clarissa, anger and heartbreak roiling together. She pressed a hand over her belly, inhaling slowly to calm herself. The last thing she wanted was to faint or cause a scene that might harm her baby. "No, you're not here to fight," Clarissa said. "But you're playing a dangerous game. Remember, the man who cheats with you can cheat on you just as easily." Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but the tension was shattered by the sound of footsteps. They both turned to see Winston stepping into the garden, worry etched across his features. "Clarissa, are you all right?" Clarissa straightened her posture. I'm fine, Father. The older man looked between Clarissa and Sophia, quickly piecing together the confrontation in progress. Though he kept his tone neutral, there was a coldness in Winston's eyes as he addressed Sophia. Miss Dela Cruz, if you'll excuse us, I'd like a moment alone with my daughter. Sophia hesitated, then gracefully slid past them and back into the mansion. Once she was gone, Winston took Clarissa's hand. This is unacceptable, he murmured. I won't stand by and watch my daughter be humiliated. Clarissa exhaled, a tear finally escaping down her cheek. I know, but I need time to think, Father. I have to decide what's best for me and the baby. Winston pulled her into a gentle embrace, the garden's stillness enveloping them. I'll support whatever decision you make. And as the moonlight bathed them in its glow, Clarissa realized she was at a crossroads. One path led back inside to Alexander, to their marriage, to the heartbreak. The other path remained uncertain, but it offered a hope for dignity and independence that she had nearly forgotten was possible. Long after most guests had gone home, the Harrington estate finally settled into an uneasy silence. The staff busied themselves cleaning up the remnants of the lavish party, collecting empty champagne flutes and disposing of flower arrangements that had begun to wilt under the harsh light. Clarissa retreated to her bedroom suite, feeling a lifetime older than she had at the start of the night. She slipped off her silk gown, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. The curve of her stomach was more noticeable now that she no longer wore a loose dress. She ran her hand across her abdomen, feeling the comforting presence of her unborn child. Is this how I want to raise you? She thought. In a household where your father disrespects me so openly? Down the hall, the door to Alexander's study was slightly ajar. Light spilled into the corridor, accompanied by the faint aroma of whiskey. Clarissa took a deep breath and walked toward it, determined to confront him, but also to keep her emotions in check. She found Alexander behind his massive mahogany desk, staring at his computer screen. He looked up when she entered. Clarissa, he greeted, though his voice lacked warmth. She closed the door quietly behind her. What you did tonight was humiliating, she began, her voice a subdued tremor. On my birthday, of all days, you bring her here? Alexander rubbed his temples, exhaling. Look, I'm sorry it had to happen this way. But you've known our relationship has been strained for a long time. Sophia is part of my life now. Clarissa bristled. And I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. A flicker of guilt flickered in his eyes, then vanished. I know that, he said tersely, but you've made no attempt to support me in my ventures. You constantly criticize my absences, my business expansions, my choices. Clarissa stared at him in disbelief. Because you constantly push me away. Every time I try to meet you halfway, you vanish on another business trip or stay out late with no explanation. Do you even hear yourself? He rose from his chair, circling the desk to stand before her. She realized how tired he looked, shadows beneath his eyes betraying a man under pressure. Yet sympathy was hard to muster when she remembered Sophia's smug presence. I'm under tremendous stress, Alexander said, pacing the length of the room. We're finalizing an international deal with the Saudis. I have a board meeting next week that could make or break the new technology division. And now we have a baby on the way, something you didn't even tell me until you announced it to everyone tonight. Clarissa's anger flared again. I planned to tell you privately, but you've been avoiding me for weeks. We barely share a meal, let alone a meaningful conversation. Alexander rested his hands on the back of an ornate chair, letting out a long breath. I can't do this right now. She studied him for a moment, then said softly, if you won't choose to be a husband and father, then I'll make a choice for myself and this child. Her words hung in the air like a distant thunderclap. Alexander frowned. What does that mean? It means, Clarissa said, her voice firmer now, I'm considering leaving. I can't endure this spectacle. Not for me, and not for our baby. Alexander's face paled, though she couldn't tell if it was from fear or anger. He opened his mouth as if to respond, then closed it again. In the silence that followed, Clarissa realized she had made her decision. She would not allow herself to be paraded around like a trophy wife while he flaunted his affair in her face. Without waiting for his reply, she turned on her heel and left the study. Her steps echoed in the corridor, each one a resolute stride toward whatever future she would create away from this toxic environment. In her bedroom, Clarissa shut the door and rested her back against it. She felt a swirl of emotions, sadness, anger, fear, but also an unexpected sense of freedom. She was done pretending everything was fine, done playing the role of the compliant wife while her husband publicly undermined her. Tomorrow, the press would likely run scandalous headlines. Social media might explode with speculation, but tonight, as she placed a protective hand over her unborn child, Clarissa felt a calm resolve. She would not be defined by Alexander's betrayal. She would forge her own path, even if she had to go through heartbreak to find it. The next morning arrived with a clamor of news vans outside the estate's gates. Word had leaked from the party, perhaps from a staff member or an opportunistic guest, about the shocking drama. A billionaire husband bringing his mistress to his pregnant wife's birthday celebration. Journalists scrambled to piece together the story, hungry for exclusive interviews or even a single photograph that captured the tension. Clarissa awoke to the sounds of muffled shouting below her window. She peered through the curtains and saw a small crowd of reporters, cameras at the ready. Her heart sank at the spectacle. She had grown up under the public's gaze, but never had she felt so exposed, so vulnerable. She prepared herself for the day with steady determination. Slipping into a comfortable yet elegant maternity dress, she summoned the household staff and informed them. She would handle any necessary statements herself. She then called her personal lawyer, Margaret Lee, a formidable mind in family law. "Margaret," Clarissa said when the call connected, "I need your advice. Things have gotten complicated. Alexander has openly brought another woman into our marriage, and I need to protect myself and my baby." Margaret's calm voice offered reassurance. "We can discuss your options: prenups, child custody, financial support, property division. The media storm will be intense, but we can manage it. Do you want me to come over?" "Yes, please." Clarissa exhaled. "I'd like to figure out the best course of action sooner rather than later." Alexander, meanwhile, had already left the estate for his office, avoiding the reporters gathered outside. Clarissa suspected he'd do damage control from behind a conference table, likely spinning a narrative that made him appear the victim of marital discord. His statement would undoubtedly gloss over his blatant betrayal, focusing instead on their incompatibilities. Clarissa was determined not to be caught off guard by his rhetoric. By mid-morning, Margaret Lee arrived, carefully navigating her way through the reporters. She was a short, impeccably dressed woman who exuded both warmth and steely resolve. They sat together in the sunlit parlor, far from prying ears. "Clarissa, the first question is, do you intend to remain married?" Margaret asked, pulling out a notepad. Clarissa took a long moment to consider. Memories flashed through her mind: her wedding day, the joy they once shared, the nights spent discussing dreams for the future, and the gradual drift into secrecy and lies. Finally, she shook her head. "I can't see a way forward with Alexander. He's made it clear he's invested in someone else. I won't subject myself or my child to that kind of instability." Margaret nodded, jotting notes. "Understood. In that case, we can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and mental cruelty. Your prenuptial agreement does entitle you to significant assets, but we need to ensure Alexander can't manipulate his financials." Clarissa's hand rested protectively over her abdomen. "And the baby? I want to make sure custody is clarified. Margaret's lips curved into a sympathetic smile. We'll arrange for shared custody, though you can request primary custody if you can prove it's in the child's best interest. Given Alexander's public behavior, it shouldn't be too difficult. They spent the next hour outlining a plan, reviewing documents, and strategizing how to handle the inevitable media onslaught. Winston joined them midway, offering both emotional support and financial resources. Clarissa felt a surge of gratitude for her father's unwavering presence. Despite everything, she was not alone. As Margaret departed, Clarissa steeled herself to face the reporters outside. She stepped out onto the front steps of the estate, her father by her side. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. Microphones jostled for position as frenzied voices called out her name. Clarissa raised a hand for silence. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice shaking slightly before she steadied it. "I would prefer privacy during this difficult time. However, I understand there are questions. All I can say is that Alexander Harrington and I are dealing with personal matters, and my primary concern is the well-being of my unborn child." "Are you divorcing Mr. Harrington?" a reporter shouted. Clarissa paused, meeting the cacophony of eyes and lenses head-on. "I'm consulting with my legal counsel regarding all available options. That's all I can share for now." She turned to leave, ignoring the avalanche of follow-up questions. Though her heart pounded, she felt a newfound sense of courage. This was the beginning of her own narrative one, where she would no longer be overshadowed by Alexander's towering presence. Inside the estate, a staff member closed the doors behind her. Clarissa's resolve crystallized. She would stand firm, not just for herself, but for the little life growing within her. The drama had only begun, but Clarissa was ready to fight for her future. Across town, in the Harrington Global headquarters, Alexander paced his corner office, phone pressed to his ear. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan's skyline, but his attention was laser-focused on the crisis at hand. "You promised me this merger would go smoothly," he barked into the phone. "Now the board is panicking because of the media circus around my personal life. I need a statement from PR immediately." On the other end of the line was Harrington Global's chief communications officer, a man named Bradley Swain. He attempted to maintain professionalism despite Alexander's aggressive tone. "We have a draft statement ready to go. However, I strongly advise a unified approach with your spouse. The tabloids are having a field day with the rumors." Alexander exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Clarissa's not cooperating. She's consulting her own lawyers and refusing to speak with me." Bradley's hesitation was evident. "With all due respect, if you and Miss S. Harrington appear combative, it could harm the company's public image even more. The board wants stability." Alexander slammed a fist onto his desk. "If the board is so concerned, they can remember how much Harrington Global owes to my leadership. Get the statement ready." He hung up abruptly and sank into his leather chair. His reflection in the polished surface of the desk stared back at him, a man who prided himself on control, now embroiled in a scandal that was spiraling out of his hands. His phone buzzed with incoming texts, presumably from Sophia and from other acquaintances wanting clarity or, worse, gossip. Just then, Kenton Cross knocked on the open door. A long-time associate in real estate, Kenton had been invited to the birthday party fiasco and had witnessed the meltdown firsthand. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You've really stirred the pot this time, Alexander," Kenton remarked, seating himself across from the desk. "The business community is whispering about whether you can handle your personal life, let alone these billion-dollar deals." Alexander bristled. "I know how to manage my personal affairs. The tabloids will move on once something else catches their attention." Kenton folded his arms, eyeing Alexander critically. "And your wife?" She looked serious about taking the baby and walking away. You stand to lose a lot if you don't handle this diplomatically. Alexander's jaw tightened. You think I don't know that? I've been poring over the prenup. My lawyers assure me we have options. Kenton shook his head. But is a nasty legal battle worth it? The public loves Clarissa. She's philanthropic, well-spoken, practically royalty in certain circles. If she plays the sympathy card, you'll be painted as the callous husband who flaunted his mistress. You might win the merger, but you'll lose the court of public opinion, and that can hurt your bottom line in the long run. Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose again, feeling a headache bloom behind his eyes. So what do you suggest? Speak to her, Kenton replied evenly. Come to an arrangement. Maybe it's time you realize that salvaging your reputation is more critical than stroking your ego. Alexander glared at him, but said nothing. Deep down, he knew Kenton was right. His entire empire was built on public trust, stakeholder confidence, and the allure of success. The scandal was tarnishing that aura. Stocks had already dipped slightly, and rumors swirled of potential investors pulling out. After Kenton left, Alexander's phone buzzed again. This time it was Sophia. He stared at the screen, weighing whether to answer. Finally he picked up. What do you need? He asked curtly. Sophia's voice was soft. I'm worried about you. The media is hounding me too. People are calling me a home wrecker, saying all sorts of things online. He sighed heavily. It'll blow over. Don't respond to them. There was a brief pause. And us? Where do we stand if Clarissa files for divorce? Alexander's mind reeled. He pictured his future, either losing massive chunks of his estate in a bitter divorce, or fighting Clarissa in court. Neither option seemed appealing. I don't know, he finally admitted. I need time to think. He ended the call without a proper goodbye, tossing his phone onto the desk. For the first time in a long while, he felt uncertain, cornered. The carefully curated life he'd built was crumbling, his company threatened by rumor, his marriage on the brink, and his mistress already demanding reassurances. The unstoppable Alexander Harrington was suddenly at a loss. Yet even in this low moment, a flicker of stubborn pride coursed through him. He hadn't fought his way to the top to be taken down by gossip and scandal. I can handle this, he told himself. I'll do whatever it takes to come out on top. Over the following week, the media frenzy grew to epic proportions. Magazine covers screamed headlines like Harrington's double life and billionaire's mistress crashes. Pregnant wife's birthday. Talk shows dissected every available crumb of information, inviting body language experts to analyze clips from the birthday party. Social media lit up with hashtags pitting hashtag Team Clarissa against hashtag Team Alexander, although the vast majority appeared to rally around Clarissa. Feeling cornered, Alexander's PR team issued a formal statement. Mr. and Miss S. Harrington are committed to resolving their private matters amicably and appreciate the public's understanding during this personal transition. The statement, however, did little to quell the speculation. Rumors surfaced that Clarissa was preparing to file for divorce citing adultery, which carried heavy implications for Alexander's standing in certain conservative business circles. Clarissa maintained a dignified silence, refusing interviews. She entrusted her father Winston to handle any urgent press inquiries, while her lawyer Margaret readied the necessary legal documents. The Harrington estate turned into a fortress, gates closed, security heightened, and staff under strict instructions to turn away all outsiders. Still, life had to continue. Clarissa, who once curated art shows, found herself diving into a new project, a children's arts charity event, something she hoped to do in honor of her baby. She threw herself into philanthropic efforts as a way to cope with her emotional turmoil. Each day brought fresh heartbreak whenever she remembered the betrayal, but she also felt a growing excitement about her future as a mother. Isabella Quinn paid frequent visits, offering both creative input on the charity event and emotional support. Together, they scouted venues, reached out to sponsors, and began planning a gala that would bring attention to arts programs for underprivileged youth. Clarissa found a renewed sense of purpose in this project. She might have lost faith in her marriage, but she still believed in making the world a better place. Meanwhile, Alexander fought on the business front. The prospective merger he'd been touting was now at risk. Foreign investors hesitated to link their brand with a man drowning in scandal. Even so, he soldiered on with negotiations, offering sweetened terms and personal guarantees. He also hired a high-powered legal team to mount a defense in the likely divorce proceedings. His lawyers tried various tactics, sending documents that questioned Clarissa's mental state, insinuating she might be unstable due to pregnancy hormones. It was a ruthless strategy designed to protect Alexander's assets and hamper her claims in court. When Clarissa received those documents, she felt physically ill. The insinuation that she was mentally compromised due to pregnancy was more than just an insult. It was a direct threat to her credibility as a prospective mother. Margaret quickly drafted a sharp rebuttal, warning Alexander's team that any further slander would be met with defamation suits. In quieter moments, Clarissa felt the weight of it all. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night, tears silently streaming down her cheeks as she grieved the happy future she once envisioned with Alexander. But each time, she reminded herself of the new life growing inside her, the gentle flutters that reminded her she was no longer alone. That simple fact fueled her resolve. On day 8 of the media onslaught, Clarissa received a personal phone call from an unexpected ally, Catherine Lyons, a renowned talk show host with a reputation for championing women's rights. Clarissa answered hesitantly. "Clarissa," Catherine said in a soothing tone, "I'd like to invite you for an interview, no gimmicks. Just a chance for you to speak your truth, if you're ready." Clarissa hesitated. Part of her wanted to remain silent, to guard her privacy. But the other part, a growing part, recognized that telling her side of the story might turn the tide in her favor and possibly set the record straight about her pregnancy, her plans, and her dignity. "I'll consider it," Clarissa answered. "Give me some time." She ended the call, realizing she stood at another crossroads. A public interview could be a powerful weapon in this media war, a chance to reveal Alexander's manipulations without stooping to his legal team's level. Yet it also meant exposing her vulnerabilities before millions of viewers. As she paced the grand foyer of the Harrington estate, Clarissa gently rested a hand on her belly. "Whatever path I choose," she whispered to her child, "I promise it'll be one that leads us to a life of love and respect." And so the battle lines were drawn. Alexander might have commanded armies of lawyers and PR experts, but Clarissa had discovered a deeper strength within herself. The stage was set for the next crucial act of their unfolding drama, the moment she would decide whether to stand in the public eye and reclaim her narrative or stay quiet and let the scandal define her. Clarissa ultimately accepted Catherine Lyons' invitation. The idea of publicly exposing her pain both terrified and intrigued her. But the potential benefits were clear. The chance to correct the rumor mill, to assert her agency, and to make known her intentions for her child's future. After consulting with Margaret and Winston, she agreed to a carefully orchestrated, sit-down interview in a private, tasteful setting, a neutral location that felt neither intrusive nor contrived. On the evening of the interview, Clarissa arrived at Catherine's production studio, which had been converted into a warm, living room-like set. Soft lighting framed 2 comfortable armchairs positioned opposite one another. A small floral arrangement and a table with glasses of water separated them. Off-camera, a minimal crew whispered final adjustments, ensuring the microphone levels were correct and the cameras were rolling smoothly. Catherine greeted Clarissa with a warm hug, whispering, "Remember, you're in control. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, just say so." Clarissa nodded. She took a steadying breath and settled into her chair, clad in a modest, elegant dress. She appeared every bit the poised socialite, except for the vulnerability in her eyes, which revealed the depth of her turmoil. Once the countdown ended, Catherine opened the interview. "Good evening. Tonight, I'm joined by Clarissa Taylor Harrington, who's found herself in the eye of a media storm involving her marriage to billionaire Alexander Harrington. Clarissa, thank you for being here." Clarissa offered a polite smile. "Thank you for having me, Catherine." Catherine leaned in with genuine concern. "You've remained largely silent since the reports emerged of Alexander's affair. Why choose to speak now?" Clarissa folded her hands in her lap, exhaling slowly. "This past week has been overwhelming. I've been hounded by paparazzi, and my family's privacy has been invaded. But I've also realized that silence allows others to control the narrative. I want people to understand that I am not just Alexander Harrington's wife. I am my own person, and I have my own story." Catherine nodded, leaning forward. "I understand you're expecting your first child with Alexander. How has that impacted your decisions?" A gentle hand drifted to Clarissa's stomach. "Enormously. Becoming a mother changed my perspective on what I'm willing to endure. I realized I can't raise my child in a home filled with deceit. That's not the environment I want for them." Catherine's gaze was sympathetic. "What do you say to those who argue that marital problems should be resolved in private?" Clarissa's voice trembled slightly. "Normally I'd agree. But when someone brings their mistress to your birthday party in front of hundreds of guests, it's no longer a private matter. It's humiliating, and it forces you to respond. And the media, well, they thrive on sensational stories." Catherine's tone turned more serious. "The rumor mill suggests you're seeking divorce. Is that true?" A flicker of emotion crossed Clarissa's face. "Yes, I'm filing for divorce. I have to protect myself and my child. Alexander's affair. It isn't the only problem we've had, but it's the final straw." The studio fell silent as the gravity of her words settled. Catherine glanced at her notes, then chose her next question carefully. "There have been allegations from Alexander's legal team that you're emotionally unstable due to your pregnancy. How do you respond?" Clarissa's eyes hardened. "I'm not surprised. Unfortunately, that's a common tactic to discredit women, especially pregnant women. I'm under a doctor's care, and I'm perfectly capable of making rational decisions. If anything, pregnancy has made me more clear about what I want in life." Catherine nodded, then leaned back with a soft smile. "What do you envision for your future and your child's?" For a moment, Clarissa's features softened. "I want a peaceful life filled with love, where my child can grow up knowing respect and kindness. I plan to continue my philanthropic work, especially with children's art programs, and I hope that my child will one day be proud of the person I've become." The interview concluded on a reflective note, with Catherine praising Clarissa's courage. "Thank you for your honesty and vulnerability tonight. I'm sure your story will resonate with many who faced similar betrayals." Clarissa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since the scandal broke, she felt free, having shared her truth on her own terms. The cameras powered down, and Catherine stood to hug her again, whispering, "You are amazing. Stay strong." By the time Clarissa emerged from the studio, she found Winston waiting for her. He gently took her arm. "Proud of you, my girl," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. Clarissa managed a weak smile. "This is the beginning, isn't it?" Winston nodded, guiding her toward the waiting car. "Yes, but at least now you're writing your own story. She climbed into the vehicle, gazing out at the city lights. Somewhere in the labyrinth of skyscrapers stood Alexander, likely watching the interview and scrambling for his next move. But for Clarissa, the course was set. No longer a silent victim, she embraced this new chapter with resolve. Whatever awaited, she wouldn't face it as the timid wife, overshadowed by her husband's arrogance. She was a mother-to-be, fighting for her child's future with every ounce of courage she had. Alexander did indeed watch the interview from his penthouse apartment. The crisp, modern furnishings offered little comfort as Clarissa's words sank in. She had confirmed the divorce publicly, exposing his affair in a calm, dignified manner that made him seem like a heartless villain. His phone vibrated incessantly with texts and calls, business partners, board members, friends, and even Sophia. He finally answered Sophia's call. "Did you watch it?" he asked, voice taut. "I did," Sophia replied. "It's not good for you, Alexander. Public sympathy is with Clarissa. Everyone's calling her a brave mother-to-be, and you're—" She trailed off, as if reluctant to finish the sentence. Alexander ground his teeth. "I'm what, Sophia?" she sighed. "You're the unfaithful billionaire. Social media is destroying you. The board might oust you if the stocks continue to dip." A hot flush of panic coursed through Alexander, though he struggled to maintain composure. "I can't be ousted from my own company. I control the majority shares." "Yes, but if confidence in you drops enough, they might find a way. You've made some enemies on the board over the years." Alexander inhaled sharply, recalling the tense board meetings where he'd forced through expansions, ignoring cautionary advice. Perhaps those resentments now had fertile ground to grow. "So you're saying I should apologize publicly? Backtrack?" Sophia hesitated. "Maybe. Or paint Clarissa as manipulative. If you let her narrative stand uncontested, you'll lose. You need to fight back." The idea churned in Alexander's gut. His pride rebelled against apologizing, but he also feared the destructive potential of Clarissa's public image. "I'll speak with my PR team," he said curtly, ending the call. Within an hour, Alexander convened an emergency meeting with Bradley Swain and a team of crisis management experts. They sat around his long glass table, laptops open, phone lines buzzing. "Mr. Harrington," Bradley began, clearing his throat. The interviewers galvanized public support for Clarissa. She's being hailed as a role model for women standing up against infidelity. We need to refocus the narrative on your business achievements, your philanthropic efforts. Remind people who you are outside of this scandal. One of the crisis managers chimed in. "Alternatively, we can release a counter-statement accusing Miss Harrington of withholding the pregnancy from you, arguing she used it as leverage. That angle might shift some blame her way." Alexander scowled, recalling how Clarissa had tried to inform him, but was met with his own negligence. "That might be thin," he muttered, though desperation flickered in his eyes. "But we can't just let her run away with this." Bradley hesitated, then spoke softly. "Alexander, maybe you need to consider a genuine apology. Public contrition could do wonders. A show of remorse. A vow to continue supporting Clarissa and the child financially, no matter what." Alexander's pride warred with the rational part of his mind. He loathed the thought of appearing weak. Apologies were for those who admitted they were wrong, and in his eyes, Clarissa bore some responsibility for the breakdown of their marriage. But the alternative, an all-out battle, might irreparably damage his empire. "Draft a statement," he finally conceded, tension visible in his clenched jaw. "Frame it as me regretting how events unfolded, reaffirm my commitment to the child, and mention I hope Clarissa and I can come to amicable terms." Bradley nodded, relief evident on his face. "We'll have it ready by morning." As the team filed out, Alexander remained in his chair, staring at the city lights. Amicable terms, he thought, recalling the legal documents accusing Clarissa of emotional instability. Those had been his lawyer's idea, but he hadn't protested. He knew it would likely anger her further. How did it all come to this? His mind drifted to memories of Clarissa, once bright, playful, engaging. Their early dates in Paris, spontaneous trips to the Caribbean, and dinners where they'd talk late into the night about their shared dreams. He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment their relationship frayed. Perhaps it had been a series of small betrayals, neglected conversations, growing distances. Now, they stood at opposite ends of a public battlefield, neither willing to yield. A heavy sigh escaped him. For the first time, a small voice inside whispered that perhaps Clarissa wasn't the only one hurting. He pictured her face during the interview, sad, determined, and undeniably pregnant with his child. But the fleeting remorse clashed with anger. Her going public felt like an ambush, leaving him cornered. He pushed down whatever empathy he'd felt and resolved to win, no matter the cost. If Clarissa wanted war, he'd fight with every tool at his disposal. Days turned into another week. Clarissa's interview aired worldwide, generating impassioned debates. Donations to her charity soared, while Alexander's once gleaming reputation took blow after blow. Stockholders of Harrington Global expressed discomfort in private meetings, and rumors persisted that the board was exploring contingencies should Alexander's public image compromise the company's stability. Clarissa remained sequestered at the estate, focusing on her health and the charity event. Despite the hailstorm of sensational headlines, she found pockets of peace reading, journaling, painting. She even began designing a nursery, selecting soft pastel hues and whimsical animal murals, determined to provide a nurturing environment for her child. Alexander, however, escalated his counteroffensive. His lawyers filed motions claiming Clarissa had deliberately withheld news of her pregnancy to manipulate him. He declined a direct interview but released a video statement where he appeared remorseful yet subtly blamed marital discord on Clarissa's lack of supportive understanding of his business pressures. The statement earned mixed reactions. Some found it sincere, others labeled it damage control. Late one afternoon, Clarissa heard the echo of raised voices downstairs. She emerged from her room to see Winston arguing with a man in a tailored suit, one of Alexander's lawyers. Margaret Lee stood close by, her expression mirroring Winston's anger. "Clarissa, they've come to serve you additional papers," Margaret explained, exasperation in her voice. "They're pushing for an urgent hearing on spousal support and property claims." Clarissa stiffened. "Is Alexander here?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrington is not present. He simply sent me to deliver these documents." Clarissa accepted the paperwork, scanning the legal jargon that essentially questioned her entitlement to portions of the estate, claiming she abandoned the marriage. It also criticized her for public defamation, claiming that the interview painted Alexander in a damaging light. She felt her blood run cold. "That's enough," Winston growled, turning to the lawyer. "You can leave now. Any further communication goes through Miss Lee." The lawyer bowed stiffly and departed. Clarissa closed the door behind him, heart pounding like thunder in her chest. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "He's not letting up." Margaret placed a reassuring hand on Clarissa's shoulder. "We anticipated this. We'll fight it." Later that evening, Clarissa locked herself in her bedroom. She gazed at the city skyline outside her window, tears finally overtaking her composure. The weight of the baby in her womb felt both comforting and terrifying. Her child was counting on her to provide stability and security. Yet Alexander's relentless legal maneuvers threatened everything she was trying to build. In that moment, she made another life-changing decision. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years, an old family connection in England, who owned a country estate far from the paparazzi's reach. The phone rang and a familiar voice answered. Aunt Rosalind, Clarissa said, her voice trembling. I need a place to stay, somewhere I can clear my head. Is your guest cottage still available? Her aunt's warm reply was immediate. Of course, my dear. Come as soon as you wish. Clarissa ended the call, a surge of relief coursing through her. If Alexander wanted to wage war, fine, but she wouldn't remain a sitting target. She would remove herself from the toxic environment, cross an ocean if she had to, and focus on her child's well-being. The estate in England was secluded, nestled in lush countryside, the perfect retreat where she could gather her strength and prepare for the final battles to come. She spent the rest of the evening making arrangements, instructing Margaret on how to handle any urgent legal matters in her absence, coordinating with Winston to keep an eye on the estate, and packing essentials for the journey. A strange calm took hold of her as she placed each folded maternity garment into her suitcase. She was no longer passively reacting to Alexander's betrayals. She was charting her own course. At midnight, Clarissa stood by the nursery she'd only just begun to decorate, her heart squeezed with bittersweet emotion. We'll come back, she whispered to the unborn child. But for now, we need a safe haven. She left the nursery lights off, gently closing the door behind her. A new chapter awaited, one that would test her resilience, her capacity for healing, and her willingness to protect what truly mattered. Regardless of Alexander's tactics, Clarissa was determined that neither she nor her child would live in the shadows of his ego and deception ever again. Clarissa's departure from New York was quiet, shrouded in secrecy to avoid the press. A private car whisked her to a discreet gate at the airport, where she boarded a small jet bound for England. The aircraft hummed gently as it rose above the city lights, each twinkle below her growing distant until the skyline was nothing more than a memory. The flight offered time for reflection. In the silent cocoon of the cabin, she flipped through photographs of her and Alexander from years past. Their wedding day, two beaming faces full of hope, honeymoon snapshots in Santorini, laughter and golden sunsets, snapshots of philanthropic galas where they stood arm in arm. Each image felt like a relic from another era, proof that once they had shared something precious. Where did it all go wrong, she wondered, though the question no longer carried the same sting. She was moving forward. Answers might never come, and that was acceptable. By dawn, the plane touched down on the fog-veiled runway of a private airfield in England. Waiting for her was Aunt Rosalind, a regal woman in her 60s, with streaks of silver in her hair. She enveloped Clarissa in a warm embrace the moment they met on the tarmac. "My darling girl," she murmured, "you've been through so much." Clarissa felt tears threaten to spill. "I need some time away from all of it." Hand in hand, they climbed into a vintage Bentley that carried them through rolling hills, past grazing sheep and stone cottages. Eventually, they arrived at a sprawling countryside manor, Aunt Rosalind's ancestral home. Clarissa was shown to a quaint guest cottage with ivy climbing its walls, flower boxes brimming with lavender, and a little pond nestled behind it, surrounded by willow trees. It was a world apart from the opulence of the Harrington estate, yet just as enchanting in its own right. Over the next few days, Clarissa settled into a gentle routine, morning walks through dew-kissed fields, afternoons sipping tea with Aunt Rosalind, and evenings reading by the fire. The relentless hammering of paparazzi and the digital storm of social media felt a million miles away. She checked in with Margaret daily, learning that Alexander's legal team was livid about her disappearance, but there was little they could do. Legally, she was free to travel. Winston reported that the media had calmed somewhat, disappointed to find no further drama at the Harrington estate. One drizzly afternoon, as Clarissa lounged in a cushioned window seat, she felt a firm little kick inside her belly. She smiled, placing a hand over the spot. "You're going to be strong," she whispered. Stronger than I ever was. In that moment, she realized how much she had changed in just a matter of weeks. No longer the hesitant wife striving to keep up appearances, she felt a quiet power blooming inside her, a determination to create a life of peace and integrity for her child. Occasionally, her mind drifted to Alexander. She'd wonder if he regretted his actions, if he missed her, or if he was merely strategizing his next business move. But those thoughts no longer twisted her heart in knots. The pain had dulled into a distant ache, a sign of healing. She might have loved him once, but she loved her child more fiercely than anything else. It was that love that propelled her onward. Aunt Rosalind's estate became a sanctuary for introspection, a place where Clarissa could nurture both her pregnancy and her spirit. Each day her belly grew, and with it, her resolve solidified like the ancient stones in the manor walls. She would finalize the divorce on her own terms, ensure her child's future was secure, and continue her philanthropic passion. If Alexander wanted to remain locked in his cycle of ambition and scandal, that was his choice. Sitting by the pond one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in lilac and gold, Clarissa exhaled softly. The reflections of the willow trees rippled on the water's surface, reminding her of life's impermanence. She couldn't control what had happened, but she could shape what would come next. As twilight fell, she returned to the cottage, heart lightened, ready to face the final notes of her confrontation with Alexander whenever that day would come. For now, she found solace in the hush of the English countryside, every breath affirming her newfound independence, and the life growing inside her both delicate and immensely strong. Outside a quiet English manor, beneath a sky of lavender and gold, Clarissa has finally found a sanctuary for herself and for the child she carries. Though her journey began in heartbreak and betrayal, it transformed into a testament of courage, self-discovery, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Still, the world watches, waiting to see if Alexander Harrington will repent, retaliate, or relinquish the empire he fought so hard to build. In the meantime, Clarissa holds fast to her hopes for a future defined by love, integrity, and resilience. Will this billionaire's betrayal spark a revolution in Clarissa's life? Or will old wounds heal into a fragile truce?